A single crack on the ocean floor moved the entire planet. GPS coordinates shifted, the Earth's axis tilted, and before anyone could react, hundreds of thousands were dead. This is the science behind the deadliest force on Earth, the tsunami. They thought it was just another quiet Alaskan night. The sky was clear, the air still, and the water calm. But deep beneath the surface, something was about to explode. On July 9, 1958, at 10:15 p.m., the Earth cracked. A massive 7.8 magnitude earthquake struck under the Fairweather Fault. It didn't just shake the land, it tore the mountain apart. A chunk of rock the size of Manhattan broke loose. 30 million cubic meters of earth and ice collapsed into Lituya Bay. And within seconds, the water had nowhere to go but up. The impact launched a wall of water 524 meters into the air. That's taller than the Empire State Building and the Eiffel Tower combined. It was the tallest tsunami wave ever recorded in human history. But Lituya Bay isn't just any bay. It's a narrow fjord boxed in by steep cliffs and deep waters. It's a natural trap for disasters. When that massive chunk hit the water, it didn't splash, it erupted. It displaced the entire bay like a hand slamming into a bowl. The wave didn't rise slowly, it exploded in just moments. The wave swept across the bay. It ripped away every tree, every patch of soil. Up to 500 meters high on the mountainside. The scars are still there today. Two fishing boats were inside the bay that night. One vanished without a trace. The other, it survived, and so did the people on board. Howard Ulrich and his son were on that boat. They saw the wave coming at them like a black wall. Before they could react, they were lifted more than 30 meters into the air. Their boat flew over the treetops and slammed back into the sea like a toy. But somehow they survived, and they lived to tell the story. So, what caused such a monstrous wave? It wasn't just the earthquake. It was the rockfall. The collapse of that mountain created a once-in-a-lifetime event. Imagine dropping an entire mountain into a bathtub. That's Lituya. Except the bathtub was 200 meters deep and sealed tight on all sides. The physics were brutal. The energy from that collapse transferred almost fully into the water. And the result was a megatsunami unlike anything the modern world had seen. But barely anyone outside Alaska noticed. The wave lasted minutes. The story faded in days, but the science, the warning that still echoes. Because this wasn't just a giant wave. It was nature reminding us how small we are. A single moment of collapse, and the world changes forever. Scientists were stunned by the scale of destruction. Trees weren't just knocked over, they were stripped, shredded, and thrown hundreds of meters inland. The tree line showed a perfect arc, carved into the mountains like a scar. It was undeniable proof that this wasn't just a wave. It was a geological weapon. What made Lituya Bay so unique was its shape. The long, narrow inlet focused the energy like a cannon. When the rockfall hit the bay, it compressed the water like a piston, and water under pressure doesn't flow, it explodes. The tsunami traveled at nearly 160 kilometers per hour. There was no warning system, no chance to run. Howard Ulrich later described the wave as a wall of night. No moonlight, no sky. Just blackness moving fast. The fact that he and his son survived is still considered a miracle. Their boat was lifted, not crushed. And when they hit the water again, they were still afloat. Others weren't so lucky. The second boat, the Badger, was never found. 2 people were on board, both presumed dead. The wave didn't just take their lives, it erased all trace of them. No wreckage, no bodies, just silence. That's the cruelty of a megatsunami. It doesn't leave room for stories. In the weeks that followed, geologists arrived. They studied the torn-up forest. They took soil samples, mapped the impact zone, and interviewed the survivors. The data they gathered changed the way we understand landslide tsunamis. This wasn't the first, but it was the biggest. And it raised a terrifying question. Could it happen again? The answer yes. Lituya Bay still has unstable slopes. The tectonic fault beneath it is still active. The next big quake could trigger another collapse, another wall of water, another disaster. But Lituya wasn't just an isolated event. Around the world, there are other bays, other cliffs, other time bombs. In 1963, just 5 years later, Italy saw the Vajont Dam disaster, another landslide into a reservoir. Nearly 2,000 people died. Was a different country, a different setting, but the physics were the same. That's the hidden truth about megatsunamis. They don't come from the ocean floor. They come from the mountains. One chunk of rock, one moment of failure, and entire landscapes can be wiped clean. That's what makes them so dangerous, so unpredictable. Lituya Bay became a case study in disaster physics. Universities around the world still teach it. Engineers use it to design safer dams, safer coastal cities. But even with all the lessons, we're still vulnerable, because nature always finds new ways to surprise us. The legacy of Lituya is carved into the hillsides. It's a ghost wave, haunting the cliffs. Every fallen tree is a reminder, every stripped slope a monument, and every survivor a witness to something almost no one believed possible. Decades passed, but Lituya Bay never faded from scientific memory. In the 1980s, researchers returned with new tools. Satellite imagery, sonar mapping, and computer models helped reconstruct the event with shocking precision. What they found was even more terrifying than anyone expected. The underwater scar left by the landslide is still visible today. A massive gouge in the seabed, shaped like a wand. It proves how violently that chunk of land entered the water. The depth of the displacement confirmed the wave's height and the violence behind it. It wasn't a freak accident, it was a raw expression of geologic energy. In recent years, drone footage and LiDAR scans revealed more. Trees were flung across cliffs like matchsticks. Entire layers of soil were scraped away. The bay was reshaped in minutes. And the echoes of that night still live in the land itself. Survivors like Howard Ulrich carried the memory with them for life. He gave interviews, wrote letters, and tried to warn others. Not just about the danger of megatsunamis, but about how quickly normal can turn into disaster. One moment, they were fishing. The next, they were flying. Psychologists later studied the trauma of survivors like Ulrich. They found classic signs of PTSD, nightmares, anxiety, deep fear of the ocean. Because witnessing a 500-meter wave doesn't leave your mind untouched. Even surviving it can feel like a curse. Yet their stories became warnings. Their fear became knowledge. And their survival gave scientists the chance to understand something most people never lived through. Lituya Bay became more than a case study. It became a legend. The biggest question remained, could this happen somewhere else? The answer is yes, in Greenland, in Norway. In British Columbia there are similar bays with similar slopes. All it takes is a landslide. Some of those areas are monitored today, but many are not. Climate change is also increasing the risk. As glaciers melt, mountain slopes become unstable, heavy rainfall weakens rock layers. Earthquakes are still unpredictable, and human development continues in dangerous zones. The next Lituya might not be in Alaska, it might be somewhere we're not even watching. But that's the core lesson of Lituya. Never underestimate the land. Nature holds power we can't always see. A peaceful bay can become a cannon in seconds, and even the tallest waves start with a crack in the stone. At the end of the day, Lituya Bay wasn't just a tsunami. It was a warning written in water, rock, and death. A message from the earth itself. We are small, and the land is alive. For those who remember it, and those who study it, That night in 1958 is not over. It's still rising, wave by wave, in the minds of those who listen. And that's why this story must be told. Not to scare, but to prepare. Because if it happened once, it can happen again. And next time, the world might not be so lucky. The deadliest tsunami in history, Indian Ocean 2004. Started with silence. No warning. No sirens. Just the quiet hum of a Sunday morning. It was December 26, 2004. Families were on the beach. Children were building sand castles. Tourists were eating breakfast. And beneath the sea, a monster was waking up. At 7:50 a.m. local time, a magnitude 9.1 earthquake struck off the coast of Sumatra, Indonesia. It was one of the most powerful quakes ever recorded. The rupture tore across the ocean floor for over 1,600 kilometers. That's like splitting the ground from New York to Florida. The seafloor lifted by more than 10 meters. And that's all it took to displace trillions of gallons of water. The Indian Ocean, calm just moments before, had become a weapon. The water surged outward in all directions. No one saw it coming. No one was prepared. Tsunamis don't look like giant waves at first. They're fast, low, and silent. In the open ocean, they travel as fast as a jet over 800 kilometers per hour. And as they approach land, they rise. The sea pulls back. The shoreline retreats. Curious people walk toward the empty ocean. Not knowing death is seconds away. Thailand. Sri Lanka. India. Maldives. Somalia. The wave hit them all. It didn't just crash. It consumed. Entire villages were wiped from the map. Concrete buildings were torn apart. People were swept away like leaves in the wind. In Banda Aceh, Indonesia, ground zero, more than 160. 0 people died. That's not a typo. Whole neighborhoods vanished. Schools, mosques. Hospitals gone. Survivors described the wave as black and endless. It wasn't just water, it was debris, cars, trees, bodies, buildings. A flood filled with the end of everything. Sri Lanka lost over 30,000 lives. Trains were thrown off tracks. Roads vanished. Children were separated from their families. In Thailand, tourists filmed the ocean pulling back, thinking it was just unusual. Seconds later, they were running for their lives. Many didn't make it. India's coast was smashed. Fishing villages were obliterated. Thousands died in minutes. Even Somalia, 4,500 kilometers away, was struck by waves hours later. That's how far the destruction reached. In total, over 230,000 people died across 14 countries. It was the deadliest tsunami in recorded human history, and it lasted just a few hours. But the suffering lasted for years. Bodies were buried in mass graves. Survivors wandered ruined towns searching for loved ones. Aid workers were overwhelmed. Disease threatened to kill even more. The world responded with shock. Billions in aid poured in. The UN called it the worst natural disaster of the 21st century. But the question remained, why wasn't there a warning? The Indian Ocean had no tsunami warning system at the time. Unlike the Pacific, which had decades of preparation, the Indian Ocean was exposed. Governments weren't ready. Communities had no drills, no alarms, nothing. The 2004 tsunami changed that. Within months, an Indian Ocean tsunami warning system was being built. Sensors, buoys, satellites, all working to detect the next big wave. But for hundreds of thousands, it was already too late. In the chaos that followed, stories of survival began to emerge. A 10-year-old girl in Thailand, Tilly Smith, remembered learning about tsunamis in school just weeks earlier. When she saw the sea recede, she screamed for her family to run. Her warning saved over 100 people. She was 10 years Old and she knew more than governments. Elsewhere, there was no such luck. In Banda ACEH, rescue teams found bodies stacked in buildings, tangled in trees, buried under mud. Entire communities were reduced to rubble, roads were gone, electricity gone, hospitals overwhelmed. Survivors had nothing, no homes, no food, no water, no answers. Parents searched for their children, children searched for their parents, and everywhere grief. The scale of death was beyond comprehension. Entire families were erased, whole generations lost in one morning. The psychological trauma was immense. Survivors spoke of guilt. Why did I live when others didn't? People feared the sea for years. Some never returned to the coast. Others built shrines on the beach. Some tried to forget. Most couldn't. And then came the second wave, not of water, but of disease. With corpses unburied and clean water scarce, cholera and dysentery threatened thousands more. Relief organizations raced to distribute medicine and water purification supplies. But even the best efforts couldn't reach every village in time. Meanwhile, scientists worked to understand what happened. The fault that ruptured was part of the Tsunami megathrust subduction zone where the Indian plate dives beneath the Burma plate. It hadn't moved in centuries. Then, suddenly it released centuries of pressure in just 10 minutes. The rupture zone stretched longer than the state of California. It caused the entire Earth to vibrate. GPS stations around the world shifted by centimeters. The planet literally changed shape. Days became slightly shorter. The axis tilted ever so slightly. One earthquake. One moment. Global consequences. Seismologists were shocked. They didn't expect such a massive rupture in that area. But the quake didn't kill people. The water did. That's why the focus turned to tsunami science. They discovered that the shallow angle of the rupture helped lift the seafloor smoothly, displacing a massive volume of water without much surface disturbance. That's why there was no early sign, no explosive splash, just rising doom. And while the Pacific Ocean had long been equipped with sensors and sirens, the Indian Ocean was forgotten. This disaster exposed that blind spot, and it cost over 230,000 lives to fix it. International teams moved fast. They deployed deep-sea sensors called dark buoys, tsunami detectors that measured changes in ocean pressure. Satellites were recalibrated. Warning centers were funded. A regional network was finally established, but it was too late for the families lost. The deadliest part of the Indian Ocean tsunami wasn't just the water, it was the silence before it, the ignorance, the lack of preparation, and the global realization that nature doesn't wait for us to be ready. In many places, the last images of victims came from camcorders. Tourists filmed the ocean pulling away, laughing nervously, unaware. In the next minute, the camera drops. Screens. Chaos. Then silence. Those videos are now warnings. Ghosts trapped in pixels. Time capsules of the exact moment normal life ended. In Sri Lanka, the Queen of the Sea train was carrying 1,700 passengers along the coast. When the wave struck, it derailed the entire train and drowned nearly everyone on board. It was the deadliest rail disaster caused by a natural force. That train still stands as a memorial to lives lost. Across the affected nations, mass graves were dug, entire families buried together. Identifying victims became impossible in many areas. Bodies decomposed in the heat. Survivors had no time to mourn. They were fighting to stay alive. But something remarkable happened. The world responded. Ordinary people donated billions. Countries sent troops, doctors, engineers. Planes flew in non-stop with aid. It was one of the largest humanitarian efforts in human history. And for once, the world was united not by war, but by grief. Still, the recovery was long, years. Some people never returned home. Others rebuilt from rubble. Governments promised to rebuild stronger. In some places, they did. In others, the promises faded. But for those who lived through it, nothing was ever the same. The ocean, once a place of life, became a place of fear. In some villages, people refused to fish again, coastal towns moved inland, children were taught about tsunamis in school. And survivors spoke again and again so the world would remember. Geologists called it a black swan event, a rare, unpredictable disaster. But now the unpredictability is gone. We know what a tsunami can do, we've seen it, we've lived through it, and if we ignore it again, we have no excuse. There are now warning systems in place. But those systems only help if people know how to respond. That's the lasting challenge: education, awareness, preparation, because the ocean won't give us a second chance. The Indian Ocean tsunami didn't just kill 230,000 people, it shattered our illusion of control. It showed that in minutes, a planet can remind us who's really in charge. And it asked a brutal question: what do we do now? The answer is not fear, it's action. Learn, prepare, respect nature's power, and remember those who didn't get to, because they didn't die for nothing. They taught the world a lesson it can never afford to forget. The ocean has spoken twice, once with height, once with death. And both times, humanity was caught off guard. But you're here now. You've watched. You've learned. And that makes all the difference. If this story moved you, if it taught you something new, or made you see the world a little differently, then let it live on. Click the like button. Share it with someone who needs to understand the power of nature. And if you want more real stories like this, raw, honest, and unforgettable, subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell icon so you're the first to know when the next untold story drops. Because there's always more beneath the surface. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes the most powerful waves are the ones we never see coming.